Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting on the Land of Israel Network and also on my YouTube page, Ion Zion, and also right now on Periscope for the first time. So I'm very excited to be with all of you right now, and we have a great show lined up for you with Rabbi Mike Feuer. We're going to be talking about the Torah portion, Nasso. We're going to be getting ready for Shavout, some political stuff as well. And so without further ado, let's welcome Rabbi Mike Feuer into the stream. Rabbi Mike, shalom and welcome.
Hi, it's good to be in the stream with you, Yishai.
Yes, it's good to be. We're swimming
islands
together.
In the stream. We're like islands in the stream, my friend.
Is that what it is? Islands in the stream,
like
a Huckleberry Finn type of thing?
So you can get the song reference later.
Oh, I didn't know that one. I remember Huck Finn was on an island in the stream.
Sure, we can do that.
That's right. That was always a good image for me. First thing, I want to wish you a congratulations. Because we are towards the end of the Omer count. Last night, right. Today's 48. Really, one more day to count, and
one more.
It's a big deal to get through this count. And I want to tell you something that you said to me a few weeks ago on this very channel, on this very show. You told me something that that really affected me. You mentioned that this part of the year, I'm not going to get into the two different counts, but there's the high holidays part of the year, and then there's this part of the year that leads into Shavuot, from Pesach to Shavuot. This one, you said, is the more national interest one, as opposed to the other one, which is personal rectification. This one's national interest one, and that has guided me throughout this period. And I'm very excited for the kind of big show of national unification, if you will, at the foot of the Temple Mount, which is really supposed to be the place where we receive the Torah. And so I'm very kind of excited for this national gathering, even though not the whole nation is going to gather there, but that feeling that's really what this holiday of Shavuot is all about. And
this year we'll stay 6 feet apart, of course.
We'll stay a little bit apart. We'll be keish echad belev echad,
but socially distanced.
But socially distanced. That's right, and that's a funny time. But this is something that I also talked about with Malka on her half of the show. The corona illness really did come at this very time. There was something about a national consciousness and national rectification which happened through this period. I want to tell you that I saw a shocking graphic yesterday of where the disease hit in the United States. And it was basically New York, New Jersey, Long Island, and a few other places, but it struck the hardest exactly where the Jewish populations were.
Yes.
And to me, the way I read that is that there was I want to be the reason I'm kind of stuttering is because I want to be careful with the words. I don't want anybody to get their feelings hurt. And I don't want to say anything that is hurtful because that's not what I mean. But there is a limitation, a lessening of the power of the Jewish diaspora, I think, as we're coming back to the land of Israel. And to me, this was, however you want to understand it, it somehow lessened the influence and the power of the diaspora and made them feel more homesick for the land of Israel.
Yeah, it's a lot of heavy themes in that, but something that comes up for me is the fact that in America, communal life is institutional life for most Jews. Orthodox, non-Orthodox, the synagogue, the community centers, that's where a community exists. And in this time of social distancing, I know from speaking to family and students and friends that it's been a real challenge to feel like you're part of a community. I mean, the Zoomiverse only goes so far. But one of the things that's been driven home to me, and we've spoken about it here before, is the fact that, the highlight of this, and go all the way back to the beginning of the Omer, is the morning after our Seder. So the holiday of Chag, Pesach, we had a full davening out on the porches of our buildings. Somebody was down on their porch reading Torah. Another guy was on his porch leading Hallel. And we were all together because for us, the fabric of community is physical. Not that Jews don't live together in the places in a diaspora, but what it means to be in the land of Israel is that from the ground up, we're building Am Yisrael. And something as simple as the fact that we all have porches that are built for Sukkot, so they like slightly face each other, etc. So like we could actually be together in our separateness. Like, to me, it was a very strong symbolic representation of the other side of what you're saying, which is America. The community can be very strong, but it's always going to be superimposed on the topography of a non-Jewish world, and therefore weaker, for better or worse. So we're trying to build ground up here, and I hope we take to heart some of the lessons of this very challenging time.
Yeah, I think there's going to be changes in the way people relate to their personal life and to relate to the state of Israel, the land of Israel, and relate to just the opportunities that life gives them. At the same time, while I think people are going to be very excited to start a life again, at the same time, coming out of hibernation has not been that easy.
Yeah, it's much harder to go out than in.
Right.
Well, think about it. I mean, it's a crisis. The going in was the crisis mode, and I think that's, in my estimation, I've been speaking about this a lot with a couple of friends of mine, because the social psychology of this pandemic is going to be studied for decades. Remembering that it's far from unique. I myself made the mistake. We spoke about it here. Someone asked, like, when was the last time such a thing happened? In 1918, the Spanish flu that killed tens of millions of people was the reference point. Truth is, it's false. It's not true. I've since discovered that in 1968, there was a pandemic called the Hong Kong flu, before people got all uptight about what you call flu, right? Killed 1 million people globally. 1 million people. I was speaking to my mom about it, because she was telling me about the sociologist who read this. That's my mom. She's reading sociology papers. What do you want? But her point was that in 1968, she got married. She had 200 people at her wedding. She doesn't remember anybody even talking about it. It was Woodstock. And her take was that the world was led by people who had survived World War II. Many of them had probably the Great Depression, perhaps even World War I, depending on where they were in the arc of their leadership. And their primary instinct was not just to keep people safe. They had driving values. They had big vision. And I think a lot of what happened on the way in to sheltering, to the lockdown, is people felt a sense of purpose and clarity in the crisis. But whatever I have to do, I have to stock up. It's going to be hard, boom, going in. Coming out raises all the questions of like, what does life mean? And how are we going to overcome the more daily challenges? And how do I adjust to and shape a new reality? You hear what I'm saying? It's inevitably it's messier, because so often we lack vision to guide us.
Also, a lot of businesses are going to be deciding if they hire or rehire somebody, or like if they bring somebody back in. So too, a lot of household economics. You're like, well, I was in this weekly class and I paid for it. Do I need to do that? Maybe I don't need to do that. So those are both just examples that there's like a shakeup in the financial, but also therefore in the personal decision making. Everybody's like, well, what do I need or what I don't need? If I had such a reset, if the reset button was hit. By the way, every piece of hardware that we have needs a reset. Every single one of them, except for maybe the toaster. And when the toaster doesn't need a reset, it needs to be thrown out because it doesn't have the power to be reset. So I guess the simpler you are, the less reset you need, but then you become obsolete easier. My point is that there's been a global reset on an individual level and on a grand, on a meta level, social scale, and the only thing that really bothers me is whenever I look at my Twitter feed, I look at America again, and it's more like we say it here in Hebrew. It's got like a less of a violent kind of connotation, but it's like it's lost its human face, like Ibed Tselem Enosh. It's losing its it's not people-like anymore. It's become like a kind of madness, and it's like
the granny killers versus the deep state. That's what I'm
calling
it.
And the Trump type of thing, like F you, F. It's like guys, calm down. Like be civil again, and that breakdown of civility coming from this great source of soft power in this world, cultural soft power. I don't know. It's I don't know if the word scaring me is right, but it's irking me. I'm a little bit irked by this. Like, I can't look at people in this kind of discourse. What do you think? Is there any, what's the healing for this bomb? Nobody, and they don't even seem to feel like they're in a emotional crisis. It's like this is the new normal.
Yeah, I mean, so many things come up for me there, both from my counseling side and from the historical side. But since we're in the lead up to Shavuot, I'll just point out the sort of like famous notion that that we receive the Torah ish echad kelev echad. Right? We received Torah as one, like we were one person with one heart. And that's a language which is associated in many places in our liturgy and elsewhere that to get the light of God, you got to be together. And I think that America right now is facing a crisis point, which is part of the arc of its history as an empire. I mean, no empire stays on top forever. And the question I see hovering either over America or bubbling up from underneath, really more accurately, is, well, what really unites us? Right? Meaning, as long as we were the most prosperous, powerful nation in the world, so then there's the momentum alone keeps us together. Right now, that America is struggling, and I feel for the country as a whole and the people as individuals and all the struggles. Right? The question bubbling up is, does anything substantive really unite us? And I think that we here in Israel have faced a similar question, but it's a much easier answer, which is yes, there's much which unites us. There's also much which divides us, and we're Jews, and you put us in the room, we're going to argue, et cetera, et cetera. We've got, a couple of million Arab citizens and residents in our land, and that's a pretty divisive issue. But bottom line, we know who we are and why we're here, right? And that's an educational challenge to keep pushing and deepening that sort of growth of that. In America, I feel like no one's even trying anymore.
It's a little Tower of Babel. It feels like the Tower of Babel, where you're building something, but it doesn't have its own purpose anymore.
Yeah. And
its only purpose is to kind of fight purpose, if you will, because you need to create an alternative purpose. You don't want to go under the subservience to God rubric, and so you become God's enemy. I remember, by the way, when September 11th happened, my first thought was Tower of Babel. I remember that. I was thinking to myself, it's a tower that reaches the heavens, and it's one language, which is the financial language, which unites the world. It's called the World Trade Center.
Right.
And it went down, and it got taken down. And I remember thinking that, like, right now I'm feeling that again, which is like, there's nothing human anymore. There's nothing sweet anymore. There's no love, I would say. There's no love. There's no love that unifies.
Without commitment, there's no such thing as love. I would say that what's really starting to fray in the American discourse is a sense of commitment to the society, independent of my views of whether this leader or that movement. No, listen, we're committed to American society, whether it embodies itself in the Constitution or whether it embodies itself in the government, whatever your image of it is. That and this is something that we need to take to heart in our society, because there are elements in our society, right? And you and I sort of mingle with them sometimes. That's
what I meant before. That I get scared because the American, there's like an old adage here in Israel that whatever happens in America comes here in 5 or 10 years. And when that is the broadcast coming, the projection coming out of America, it has an inevitable impact on the whole world, and certainly in Israel as well.
And it's a very important point you're raising, that we need to begin educationally and culturally to offer a serious alternative, and that alternative is a deep commitment to our society, whether it in the moment or in the aspect we're looking at embodies our vision and ideals or not. And that's the thing that has to be appreciated, is that there are a lot of challenges within our society. I'm sure you and I could go from now to the end of the show and just list off the challenges and the blah, 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 right? And they're real and they're important. But as is true with all successful relationships, and there's no such thing as a successful relationship that doesn't have real challenges. The difference between one succeeds and the one that fails, to some degree, I would say the critical difference is the degree of commitment to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're committed, then the relationship becomes a vessel for each of you becoming the person that you could be. If you're not committed, you start knocking holes and swinging sticks, and you sink the ship.
Even disagreements and divorces need to be done in a civil way. And our Torah actually describes to us conflicts between man and wife and civil society as well, and how to deal with it properly, including divorce. So yesterday, I went to the rabbinical court in order to stand as a witness. Actually, along with Malka, went to see a couple who's a friend of ours. who we've been at their house quite a few times, went yesterday to be witnesses at their divorce. It's not proceedings; it's rabbinical proceedings to sign the get, the get plus the divorce agreement plus the transfer of money all took place right in front of our eyes yesterday. And so on the one hand, it was quite a sad day.
Sure.
Like Malka and I came back home a little freaked out, but I was mentally prepared to be freaked out. I was mentally prepared not to be mentally prepared. So that was what we saw. But I also, I also actually wanted to go see an unpleasant mitzvah done. And what I mean by that is there is a commandment to get divorced. Not that one should get divorced, but if one is to get divorced, the Torah lays out the proper the proper methodology so that a really sad human thing can take place in its proper and civil and holy and godly manner.
Gives us prescribed manner. It gives us the vessels to hold a very difficult experience in a way which is meant to be growthful and, God willing, ultimately healing.
That's right. And so my friend who was getting divorced, my male friend, because both of them are my friends, said to me, "How could somebody work here?" Because there's all kinds of people working there. And right. I said this place isn't so bad. The people that get divorced here get divorced and hopefully start their life again and start maybe something bigger and better for themselves. The hospitals are tougher in some ways than this place. I mean, you see healing and you see babies being born, but you also see
end of life.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, imagine if somebody said to one of our cells, if a heart cell said to a colon cell, "Oh, I can't believe you work in that. It's such a dirty job." Like, you know what I mean? We'd be in total trouble. Right?
You got a crappy job, man.
Yeah, you got a crappy job. It's but the other guy says I have to be on duty. So the point.
No, we're not making me laugh. I told you before the show, no laughing. No laughing. It hurts.
Okay. So my point is to you that there's cells in charge of the colon, and that digestion is and the flushing out of waste is an absolutely essential human thing. You've got to do the stuff that's dirty well.
Yes.
You've got to do it properly. And so also our Torah portion actually deals with a very tricky topic, which on the face of it may not seem politically correct, which is like the question, right, which is about something called the sota, which is when a man warns his wife that he is jealous of her behavior vis-a-vis another man, and he says, "Do not unite yourself with him." And at some point, if potentially there may be some concern that she may have done this, then he can bring her to the temple and force her to drink this drink that may lead, if indeed an adulterous relations happen, her and her lover mate into punishment by death from heaven. Of course, she can avert that in many ways by either admitting it right from the get-go or saying, "I don't want to drink this thing," and she can be cut loose of this potentially dangerous drinking. On the other hand, if she is indeed innocent of these claims, and he himself is the one who has an issue vis-a-vis that he's overly jealous, unnecessarily jealous, unjustly jealous, well, she's going to be blessed with child. We have a whole Talmud tract dedicated to this, and it's actually one of the most interesting Talmud tracts with a lot of great stories called Masechet Sota, one of my favorites. So just wanted to throw that out there to you, like why is the Torah telling us about a man's jealousy and a woman's potential infidelity, potentially taking her to the temple where a scroll which has the name of God is put into water and diluted to the point that God's name is erased, something that's generally not allowed to be done.
It's a very serious issur. It's a very serious prohibition.
So what does the Torah lay out for me of this whole sota business?
I mean, we could take so many layers on this, and I before we go deep, I think it is important just to register the simple sort of psychosocial layer here, which is that that jealousy and possessiveness within relationship is a corrosive and destructive element, right? That this is the Torah putting up a backboard of hopefulness to a society and otherwise which in a woman becomes an object of a man's jealousy and likely will be condemned to death at his own hands. Let's just remember that we're dealing with a person who has some rational basis but no evidence. So meaning on some level what we're looking at here is a social institution, as is true many in the Torah, which deals with the reality of the culture in which it was given and is an attempt to force it to evolve through legislation, through ritual, through guidance, toward a more socially conscious stance. As we said before many times, the Torah doesn't appear politically correct because in many ways it created the moral sensitivity which underlies the positive side of political correctness. There are other things in political correctness that I have no need to attribute to the Torah. But so that being said, but on a deeper level, it's also pointing out to us that the relationship between a man and a woman, a loving relationship between two individuals, is the foundation of all life in Torah. Right, and that the place when that relationship is out of balance, the place where you drag it to, so to speak, is sanctity. Right, and unless you think that dragging it to the temple is going to be a bowing before God, it's this incredible inversion of power. It's like, I'm going to drag you into the temple and put all my dirty laundry up into the sacred precinct and have the priests and God go no. No, it's God going to say, listen, this is so important to me. Wipe me out. I want you to understand. You guys got to work this out. It's more important to me that you work this out than that my name be preserved in the world, because in the end of the day, my name will be preserved in a much higher level through your right relationship.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting what you're saying about the name erasure, because you could have taken it the other way, which is, okay, like, I'm jealous, but I guess I'm not the ultimate arbiter, am I? Like, I'm going to bring you to the temple, but like the minute I do that, I'm not beating you up, God forbid. I'm not like in charge of everything. I'm not doing, what do they call it in the Islamic world? The honor killing.
Honor killing. No,
I'm not doing that.
Remembering that blood vengeance is very present in the Torah when it comes to accidental murder. And this is the other side of that culture where the Torah has created a whole institution to try to head that off.
Right. Come to the temple and let God figure, like, on the one hand, it's let God figure it out, but you're saying that God says back to them, your relationship is more important to me than my name. But I want to add an interesting thing to that. You know, the standard of our Torah is that Shalom Bayit is above God's name. God's name is willing to be erased for Shalom Bayit, for peace in the home. But I want to add one more layer to that, which is the halacha is that if a man wants to leave to the land of Israel and the wife is against it, he can divorce her and not give her ketubah, her like
She's not
money she's owed, right? Or same if the woman wants to go to the land of Israel and the husband is unwilling, she has the right to divorce him and get her ketubah and move to the land of Israel. So what the halacha there is that, let's go back, peace in the home is more important than God's name, but moving to the land of Israel is more important than peace in the home. I'm willing if you want to start your life in the land of Israel, I'm willing to go a long way. I mean, that's pretty audacious halacha there.
It is, and the only reason I was not shaking my head like that is because I think that we shouldn't mistake God's name, the role of God's name in this, is that God's name written on a piece of paper is a powerful indicator of something which is much bigger than what's written there. Mm-hmm. It's a symbol. And so therefore it's a symbol that we are enjoined and trained to treat with deep respect. The book falls, you kiss it, you write God's name on something, you don't throw it away, you bury it respectfully in a keniza, etc. Right? It has sanctity once the scroll in your tefillin or the mezuzah, etc. Like that name goes on there, and boom, it's jumped up a whole level. It's chefsa shel kedusha, as we call it. But what God's saying is that there's a name which exists within your relationship, which is higher than that. That when a man and a woman form a relationship of trust, of empathy, they become a vessel for God's name in the world, for the Shekhinah, as we say, that's for God's presence. And then Odyoter, that the national life of Am Yisrael restored in the vessel of the land is the highest sanctification of God's name there could be, right? That's what it says in Yechezkel, when God says, I'm going to bring you back, basically, because my name has been disgraced amongst the nations while you're in exile. Right. It's not about you, says God. It's about me. It's like, because my name is great when Am Yisrael is in the land. Mm-hmm. That kind of circles us back to where we started the discussion, is that if we want to have a society in which we can hold together, we don't have the illusion that we can get rid of differences, because that's a ridiculous illusion. But rather, those differences can, like between a man and a woman, become productive. Then what there has to be there has to be a mutual commitment that our very differences in the engagement in the struggle should be a sanctification of God's name. On the personal, on the interpersonal, and on the national level. And the vessel for the national level is in the land. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right, folks, you are watching the Yishai Fleisher Show. Rabbi Mike Feuer from the Pardes Institute and your other show, Jewish Story, found at jewishstory.co, joins me. I know that there's a few people for the first time that I'm broadcasting today on Periscope. So if you want to comment, please do. I think I'll be able to see your comments. So please do comment from Periscope. Just give me a shout out saying you hear us, you're connected, and of course on YouTube as well. So really appreciate that. We spoke about the couple that got divorced this week. There's my first comment from Context Symphony, saying thank you from Periscope, and thank you very much for saying thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you, doctor. And so it's just good to connect. I appreciate that. And tell me if Mr. Context, if you could tell me if it's working for you well, the Periscope model. I appreciate that. So speaking of, we talked a little bit about the divorce. I want to say kind of like God forbid, but then again, like, yes, God forbid people should get divorced. And yet on the other hand, there was a mitzvah involved in it. We talked about that. Yeah. So too.
By the way, what I try to say to people when I hear they've gotten divorced is it should be for a blessing.
Right.
Right. Meaning it's for some people, it's a terrible thing. For some people, it's the best thing that ever happened to them.
Right.
And so therefore it has the potential to be a blessing.
Right. And let's also, of course, before the show, you mentioned this to me, which is correct, which is let's bless the kids, the children of these divorces who oftentimes really do bear the brunt of it. So Bezrat Hashem, they should do well. And I think that both of those parents would agree to that phrase. Now let's take it to the next level, which is the Torah tells us, and we're in Parshat Nasso in the fourth Aliyah. It tells us that, okay, if you it actually comes to the next story, the next issue. And that next issue is the Nazir, translated poorly into English, the Nazarite, not the Nazarene. Different religion. Different thing. Yeah. I'm talking about the Nazarite, and that is a man, but I think it can be a woman as well, who decides to take upon themselves, his and herself, this life limitation. Well, this oath of life limitation. What did you call it?
It's a vow.
It's a vow. That excuse me, that person will no longer the being a Nazarene, let's stick to that, means that you no longer are allowed to take any pleasure, any eating pleasure from grape products. That means you're not allowed to eat grape leaves, but you're certainly not allowed to have raisins, but you're certainly not to have wine. That's what it's really about, wine.
And
you're not allowed to
arak.
Well, that's what I wanted to understand. It's interesting because I thought the arak is not a grape product.
I believe it's distilled. Oh, it's anise. You're right.
Yeah, it's anise. No, but there are. What you meant is brandy.
Brandy, like
777, Sheva Sheva Sheva, right? The Israel's wonderful brandy. You're not allowed to have that. You're not allowed to cut your hair, and you're not allowed to expose yourself to the energy of a body that died. You're not allowed to come in contact with a dead body, except for one, by the way, which is the dead body of a so-called met mitzvah, a person who nobody else. You walk on the road
to take care of it.
Right. There's nobody else to bury the body. You're allowed to do that, but so is a Kohen Gadol.
Right.
so important is that the sanctity of a body, that nobody else could take care of it. But in any case, our sages tell us that the reason this person decided to become a Nazir is because he likely saw a sotah, a woman that has disgraced herself with extramarital affairs. He saw her in her ruinous moment, and so he decided to kind of step away from worldly pleasures by distancing himself or herself from such actions and taking upon themselves the vow. The most famous of these Nazirim is Shimshon. Shimshon, who is a Nazir from birth, although his laws are a little bit different. But he is not only is he so famous, but even in this Shabbat's Haftorah, the reading from the prophets, from the book of Judges in our case, I think chapter 16 or maybe 15 because it's early on, but that is the story of the birth of this very special figure, Shimshon. So let's talk a little bit about this Nazir. I think the simple way to throw it out to you, Rabbi Mike, is being a Nazir a good or a bad thing?
I mean, the answer to the Torah is yes and, right? Because on some level, it's a mitzvah. So therefore, we assume that there is something positive in one's relationship to the world and to one another and to God, which comes from it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an option, right? And at the same time, the framing that you gave, that the sages say that the reason that the two parshiot are juxtaposed, that the description of the Sota and the description of the Nazir are back to back in our parsha, is because of this sort of like strange narrative thread. It's like, he was in the temple and he saw the woman in her moment of disgrace, and he said, "Oh, she's pretty. Oh my goodness, I better do something about that." It comes to tell us that this is an extreme measure. An extreme measure which is sanctioned out of recognition that sometimes, in order to keep ourselves focused on that which is right and true in our lives, we have to clamp down on behaviors which are not themselves intrinsically wrong. Remembering, of course, that certainly wine is not only not seen as problematic within the culture of the Torah and certainly in the Jewish culture, it's a source of sanctity. Every what I always picture, on Friday with a Nazir, is that, in theory, you can make Kiddush, you can sanctify Shabbat on bread if you don't have wine, but it's a serious downgrade in what you're doing. So I picture like the Nazir, it's like every week that he thinks he's getting a little holy with his vows and his self-control, it's like every week there's just a little bit of reminder of like, no, you're missing it. It's true, you're taking control of your life, and you're disciplining yourself, and that focus. And by the way, it's also remember that the Stam Nazir, Shimshon's not a great example of a Nazir because he didn't make a decision to be a Nazir. He was a Nazir declared by God from birth. The Stam Nazir, the standard time period we're talking about, is only 30 days.
30 days. That's right. It's an extreme diet.
It's an extreme diet for 30 days in recognition that there's some way I need to do inner clarification of values. And that's so much of what this is about.
All right. So when I was in college, I took with the famous classics professor, Dr. Louis Feldman. And I say famous because in that world, he is famous. He was one of the world's, foremost Josephus scholar, and taught classics. And when I say classics, I mean Greek and Roman mythology.
He's the guy they tell that joke about, that whenever missionaries would come to his door, he said he'd be happy to discuss the New Testament with them, but only if they did it in the original Greek.
I never heard that one.
I joke about him several times. I was looking if you knew him, if it was true or not.
Yeah, I never heard that one. He never said that one, but he was a very special man, a very, very special man. And I had the great privilege of taking mythology. And this is an observant Jew. This is an observant Jew who knows, who lives in his mind in the time of Josephus, and he's right there. And what a humor he had with regarding to the Greek mythology. And we went through the Iliad, we went through the Odyssey. It was great. It was, by the way, something that almost only happens at Yeshiva University. But in any case, you have this Orthodox Jew expert in Greek mythology, and you're just going through it with him.
We're gonna find that, yeah.
So I remember very well studying the story of Narcissus, And Narcissus is basically this young lad, and he looks down into this pool of water, and he falls in love with himself or this other image, and he's erotically drawn to this other image, and every time he says "I love you," there's this other god that's called Echo, and she echoes back "I love you," and every time he would reach down into the water, he would feel he wanted to hold on to his beloved image, but the water would become murky and it would be lost, and he died there from unrequited love. And there the Narcissus narcisse flower grew where he died. Right. And this is an allusion towards homoerotic. This is according to the Greeks, allusion towards homoeroticism, masturbation, the whole gamut of that world. Now, why do I mention this? You may wonder.
I think I know why you're mentioning it.
You know, but maybe a lot of folks in the time that don't. What's that?
Do we have a guest on the show right now?
No, we have a guest there.
She didn't realize the camera was pointed that way.
That's okay, no big deal. We are zooming, so people can zoom.
Okay,
we just had a Zoom bomb. We had a Zoom bomb. In any case, the Talmud tells us in about 4 places in the Talmud a great story about a young lad who came to the temple after being a Nazir to shave off his hair. And when it was Yochanan ben Zakkai, I don't remember who it was, looked at him and saw that he was a good-looking lad, said, "Lad, why did you become a Nazir? Why did you take this vow?" And he said, "Well, I looked into the pool, I saw an image, I felt attracted to that image, and I yelled at this image saying, 'Who do you think you are trying to entrap me into this way of thinking? Do you think do you not recognize your creator who made you out of nothing? And you are not to be, I'm not supposed to fall in love with you. I'm supposed to kind of,'" and immediately he rejected that sense and became a Nazir.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's so evidently a 1-to-1 fight with the Greco-Roman story of Narcissus. It's like 1-to-1. It's like, and I felt that feeling, and I said, "No, darn you." And I fought it, and I chose this other path of stern, a diet of what I see and what I touch and what I do, because I don't want to go down that path of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's not such a fight with the legend of Narcissus. It's just a much more hopeful ending. Because if you look, the way that the Greek, the power of Greek mythology and much of Greek thought is that it's quite profound in its understanding of human psychology.
Sure.
And that element of Narcissus is there in all of us, in this sort of idealized notion of self-love. And what the sages are telling you is like, okay, that'll get you nowhere. Because life is about relationship, and relationship is about accepting the ugly, messy, imperfect aspect of yourself, which is what you see in other that you reject. Always remember that most of the time when relationships break down, not most of the time, a lot of the time, when relationships break down, it's because the other who we care for has become a mirror for the thing in ourself which we refuse to see. And therefore we must destroy them in order to avoid seeing it in ourselves. It can be something as prosaic as being threatened by the wrinkles I see on my spouse's face because I don't want to get old, and it can be things much more profound. And what the sages are telling you is that you have a choice choosing life. And in this case, choosing life is cutting yourself off and getting a grip. Remember, choosing life really would be, meat, wine, and partying in the temple in an appropriate fashion. But in this case, in order to right that instinct and to avoid the illusion that the ideal of self-love will go anywhere other than narcissism, so you have to actually pull back. And the power of the structure here is quite profound. Mm-hmm. And I would point out, just as a last piece, the reason I understand it, that the only mitzvah that trumps the status of Nazir is mate mitzvah, is the dead body, which has no one else who can deal with it, is because ultimately this is about the sanctity of the embodied life. You might think the Nazir by refusing to drink wine and, removing himself from the hair care world or whatever it is, it's like, no, the physical world is meaningless and empty, and I'm retreating to my hilltop. If that were the case, you'd think he should kick that dead body as it goes by. Like, ugh, the filthy flesh. No, you need to understand something, that the role of Am Yisrael is to sanctify the body, never to reject it, because it's the vessel that God has given us to serve with.
I think it's Yehuda Cohen who says a lot of times, and I think you've said it to me also, which is like, our job is not to spiritualize the physical, but to materialize the spiritual, to bring spirituality in, right? Embodiment.
For sure.
Our friend on Periscope, Contact Symphony, says Freud calls the narcissistic element the ideal ego, which often persecutes us for not living up to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a trap, because in the same way we can't live up to our own ideal, we fall in the same trap when we look at the people we love. Mm-hmm. They'll never live up to the idealized version, because they're not ideals; they're real people.
Interesting that a person who could have loved himself a lot would have been Samson. Heroic, powerful, maybe good looking. It doesn't say that, but maybe, huh?
I said, he was popular with the ladies,
right? With the ladies,
with the Canaanite women.
That's right. Philistine, yeah, and that's right. But at the end, interestingly, he is our story of a kind of suicide. And I mean, his whole life is a kind of suicide, where he's constantly doing things in order to start up with the Philistines. And his people are not there yet. The Jews are not there yet. In fact, the tribe of Judah will bind him and hand him over to the Philistines. So they're obviously in a weak place. And here he comes, this kind of, first thing, he's the Greek hero, right? If there's one guy who you would say is
like a mythic Greek hero, for sure. Yeah.
Right. If there's one character in the whole Torah that's a little bit like that, you're like, all right, if there's a Zeus, it's Lahavdil, it's Shimshon.
Or Hercules, at least, yeah.
A Hercules, good. And at the end, though, he ends up killing himself, and he says, Tamud nafshim plishtim, like, let my soul die together with the Philistines, and he brings down the house.
Literally,
right? That's literally brings down the house upon them. But he in one way, he is the opposite of self-love.
Well, because he embodies spirit nefesh,
right?
I mean,
self-sacrifice,
but in its simple sense, soul nefesh just means to give over your soul,
right?
I mean, and that was both his, as we say, his tikkun and his kilkul. He was completely given over to whatever it was that he did. And which is how he ended up in such messy situations, right? And it's how he, in the end, redeemed. And I think it's how he embodies the key message that God was sending to Am Yisrael in that era that they lacked, as you said. Right? The men of Judah bind him and hand him over the enemy. Why? Because they don't believe in themselves that they can fight the Plishtim. And it says, Hu echal, right? He began the battle against the Plishtim. Ultimately, right. Who is the one who finishes the battle against the Plishtim? David. Yeah. Right, and he's the one who was kol kulo Masur Hashem, right? He's completely given over to God, right. And he's able to build a nation which can hold that. But yeah, the Shimshon really begins that path.
All right, let's go to the second to last topic that I'd like to cover with you today, and that is the priestly blessing. One of the oldest findings that we found in archaeology is a copy of this priestly blessing, and the priestly blessing is
the oldest written version of the biblical text.
Right.
The Silver Scroll you're talking about.
The Silver Scroll, correct. And it's something, if you ever see it, by the way, look it up on the Wikipedia. It's beautiful, amazing picture. Yeah. And the Silver Scroll, and there it is. It just says these three sentences: Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Hashem panav alecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Hashem panav alecha v'sem lecha shalom. And then some people add the last line, which is V'sam Shmi Avnei Yisrael v'ani avachem. And the reason I know this so well by heart is because this is also something that the priests bless us here in the land of Israel every day, if indeed there is if there's an indoor minyan or just a minyan of Jews praying. But we also bless our children Friday night with that blessing. That's part of it. This is the like you want to bless the Jewish children, says God to the priests. This is the text to do it. This is how to do it. This will encompass everything. Let me just get to the page there, and we're talking about. By the way, we're in the book of Bamidbar. We started the book of so-called Numbers. I think that's the least successful of the biblical names. Numbers. The book is not about numbers.
There's a lot of it. There is a lot of it. It's fair. At least it's like a warning. Like, folks, you should just know there's a lot of it.
I think had you called it In the Desert, it would have been just fine. So they should have taken a cue from the Jewish name there. Say to them,
the rabbinic name was Sefer Pikudim.
What's that?
The rabbinic name was Sefer Pikudim, which is much closer to Numbers.
Pikudim means the name, the book of those
being everyone getting their job.
Right, but remember what I always say, which is Sefer Dvarim is the Sefer Midbar is the book of politics. So Pikudim is exactly that. You got this job, you got this job. You're gonna fight about it. Okay, right. So you're supposed to say this blessing out loud. That's what a Mor Lahem says, meaning to say it out loud. Yevarechecha, that your property, your the stuff that you own should be blessed. But Yivishmerecha, that the stuff that you do get, may it be protected so you don't lose it, so that your Bitcoin will stay up. Okay, not only shall you get Bitcoin, but it shall
maintain its value.
That's right. Now, the most exciting one to me is this one. Listen to this. This is I'm going to blow your mind away now. You ready? You ready, right. Rabbi Mike?
Ready to be blown.
Yair Hashem panav elecha. May Hashem send his light of his face onto you. Says Rashi. 6 words, which I think are shocking. Here we go. Yar'eh lecha panim sochakot panim tzehubot. He shall show you, when we say that God should light his face to you, he'll show you a smiley face or a happy or laughing face, a yellow face. In other words, In other words, God is going to send you a smiley, an emoji. You're going to get a text message with a yellow smiley face. That's what he says. Panim sochakot. You couldn't even describe it any better. Panim sochakot, panim tzubot. A yellow smiley face, and that yellow smiley face is God sending you the greatest signal. Like if you got a smiley face from God in the WhatsApp in the morning, what could be greater? What could be a greater feeling than if God sent you a smiley? And when you see a smiley, think to yourself, don't think to yourself, oh, this is just a cheesy modern thing. This is a deep psychological, deep human connection, deeply a God message. The smiley face. Keep smiling. Like think good thoughts. And
I knew you were a breast lover at heart.
Well, at some place for sure. I'm definitely. Anyway, the point is that, what do you think? Smiley face? Do you see it? The first biblical smile?
I hear it. It's a. I mean, I'm a little bit put off by the cheesy emoji reference, I have to admit. But because when I think of this, I go somewhere completely different. I don't know if you're familiar with the scholar Levinas.
Sure. I took postmodern thought with Dr. Bevan at YU. Yeah.
You had a much better Jewish education than I did, my friend.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's always moved me about Levinas is that he, along with certain elements within the thought of the Maharal, identifies the Tzelem Elohim, the divine image within the face. Right, for all kinds of reasons, and it's very deep what he says, etc. And since it's Levinas, I won't even try to mangle it by explaining it. But one of the things that I've always taken away from what he says is that the face is the place where your inner life finds its most nuanced expression. It's the most malleable part of your physical being. Right? So therefore, if your inner life is going to find its expression in the world, it's going to happen in the face. And that's how I see it. These are the brachot, which, like you were pointing out, are very real, physical. They're not just abstract. God's going to give you a lot of cattle, and your cattle are going to be healthy, and your Bitcoin will do well, and all these things. That's just like real world embodied blessings. But this one is saying, and by the way, you should just know that the whole world is smiling at you. Not that just the people. The world itself is a smile. Why? Because in the inside, God only wants kol kulo chesed. Only wants to give to you.
Right.
Only wants to give to you. And the place where you're able to read that invitation, where the world is malleable enough to express that inner desire, is in the face. And so the great blessing is that you should feel the love and the smile through the whole world. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I know.
You know what it is that the first thing, the deepest thing in the world is to think about God's face. What is God's face? It's like just like you said, it's the most malleable and most expressive. It's also something that you probably you think God maybe has a hand. I mean what's the word I'm looking for? An anthropomorphic hand. He's got an action, but his face, that's like something that's like, I don't know. It's something that's Moses sees God face to face, speaks to them face to face. There's something very, very personal about God's face. And if he sends you that Ya'er Hashem panav, his face will shine onto you. That's that is the greatest joy and glory that a human being can attain. But I think that it's not a coincidence that the sun is yellow, the sun is life, the sun gives us joy. The idea of a smile is a very universal thing, and the smiley face is this thing that just came to represent very simply joy and good energy. And I think it's, on the minimal level, it's like Rashi's saying, this image, this icon is a universal icon of feeling joy and feeling that relationship of joy. But to me, I like the thought that God could send you a type of thing that's easy for you to live with. All right, let's get so speaking of that brings us right to the next and final section here that I want to cover with you today, and that's the very end of the Torah portion. And in the last two verses, we're talking in the book of Numbers, chapter 7, verse 89, Bamidbar Zayin, Parshat Nasso, Pasuk Peitet. Ubevo Moshe el Ohel Moed, when Moses would comes into the tent of meeting, ledaber ito, to speak with him, v'yishma et hakol, and he'll hear the voice, midaber elav. Very interesting word that on the simple level means that he's speaking to him, but Rashi explains midaber is that he hears God talking to himself.
Yeah, he's tuning into the God conversation,
right?
But that God's the siach of creation, the conversation of creation is eternal. It's not God talking to Moshe per se.
Right. I'll just read the Rashi. Medaber beino levein atzmo u'Moshe shomea me'elav. God is talking to himself. God has a conversation with. God has endless knowledge and information to give. Even when he's talking to us, if we think about it, he's really talking to himself. We're his created beings. And Moses hears it. Mi'ala kaporet, from above the covering of the Aron, asher ala Aron ha'edut, which is on top of the Ark of the Covenant.
Testimony.
Ark of the Testimony. Mibein shnei kruvim, from between the two cherubs, v'yidaber elav, and he spoke to him. And to him, says Rashi, lema'et Aron min hadibrot, that the dibrot, the talkings were really just to Moses. On the one hand, God is talking to himself, and we could all tune in. On the other hand, it was Moses who
Moses had the receiver.
Right, Moses was the receiver. He was he had the receiver. Right, he had the ability to hear it.
I mean, part of that is a reflection of Anav Mikol Adam. That Moshe was the most humble of all men, in the sense that he knew exactly who he was, so he could be completely open. He had the capacity to step into the tent of meeting and to actually enter into this. By the way, in reference to your earlier panim el panim, this face-to-face relationship with God, that he was able to actually, whatever that really means, to encounter. But he was also able to empty himself out and receive. It wasn't that God talking to me. Right, because the me element is the problem there. Like, oh, I hear God speaking. It's not that God is talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's a beautiful parallel to
this. This ties in very well what we were talking about before with the narcissus problem with being narcissistic. It's like the opposite of that. It's He's not even talking to me. I have the great pleasure, the great honor of being able to hear him.
And in a beautiful sort of like, you always have to weave these comments of Rashi, which are really echoing the Midrashim. You need to weave them together across the whole Torah in order to get his picture, because elsewhere, even though here he emphasizes that God was speaking to Moshe, not to Aaron. Back in Shemot, after the commandment to sanctify the new moon, when the whole commanded relationship begins, really, with Am Yisrael, at least, as opposed to the individuals, there's a reference where it's the Moshe and Aaron, that God was speaking to them, and they both spoke, because it says that Moshe would say to Aaron, you speak, and Aaron would say, no, you speak, and Moshe would say, you speak, and this is the Dibur Yatzami B'neihem, right? That actually the divine word actually came out from between them. So there's different aspects of the divine communication which is happening here. Here the focus is on Moshe. He's the right receiver, because God is, so as you like to say, broadcasting, 24/7. There, it's the fact that you actually can't hear what God has to say without being in right relationship.
Mm-hmm. And our friend here on Periscope, Context Symphony, says, the nothingness from which the universe emerges is the same of Moses, into which God pours his spirit.
Well, you froze in the middle of what you just said.
I said the nothingness from which the universe emerges is the same of Moses, into which God pours his spirit. I think what he means to say that the world is a kind of empty slate, and so Moshe Rabbeinu is like a tohu vavohu, a willingness to hear God's message without putting himself into it. He is nothingness in that sense, ready to receive.
That's exactly it. It needs to be a posture of being able to receive. And right. if this person's referring to the Chalal Panui, the sort of empty spaces the Rizal calls it, into which God shined the light of creation, it's very much, I can tell you from the counseling work I do, you can't hear a person until you make a space within yourself to allow their words to really echo. And that is absolutely what Moshe was able to do.
Well, I think this is a great place to stop. If we could bless each other and all of the folks joining us today, that at Shavuot, we'll create a space inside of ourselves to really receive that amazing light of Torah, which comes down on this 50th day of counting. And so it came down on the 6th of Sivan, 3,500 years ago. And so too, we have the chance to receive it yet again. God's Torah is new every single day, and there's something that he's telling us every day anew. Rabbi Mike Feuer, I want everybody to check out, first thing we were talking about, Parshat Nasso. Here I have it up in Hebrew on the page. I want you to check that out. And I also want to wish everybody a happy, I got to show the banners. I want to wish everybody a happy Shavuot. I want everybody to join you, if possible, on jewishstory.co. That's Rav Mike Feuer, and you can find them on Facebook and on Twitter, either at Rav Mike Feuer or Jewish Story. So that's easy, and he's got great counseling work as well. If you need his profound advice, he's available. So that's the way to reach you. Or at how do we email you?
RavMikeFeuer@gmail.com.
Make it easy for us. RavMikeFeuer@gmail.com. I want to thank the good folks at Hebron Fund that allow the Jewish people to visit the fathers and the mothers in the beautiful city of Hebron, where I have the great privilege and honor and merit of working. And that is the home of the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, the fathers and mothers of the Jewish people. And what else? Oh, of course, my website. Let's keep broadcasting together. Go over to yishaifleisher.com/donate. And we're going to be hopefully continuing to broadcast the message of the centrality of the land of Israel, the return of God's presence to Zion, the ingathering of the Jewish people, and also a global light that's shining to the world, Be'ezrat Hashem. Finally, I want to say the Context Symphony says blessings, and Shaul says, when do you plan to be broadcasting next time? Shaul, we're always broadcasting. We'll be broadcasting again next week. What's that?
I said, but when will you tune in?
That's right. Well, when will you tune in, Shaul? Be'ezrat Hashem will be broadcasting again next week. Hopefully, we'll be making more broadcasts. Rabbi Mike Feuer, thank you again so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom. All right. And Rabbi Mike Feuer, thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, for being with me. Lots of love from the land of Israel. Blessings from the land of blessings. and more great stuff is on the way. So God bless you and shalom. Yeah. How was that? Good?
Good. We're still live.
Oh. I thought I ended. I'm having a hard time
Detaching.
I'm having a hard time detaching. That's right. By the way, do you know that in the meantime, while we are broadcasting, do you know that I didn't know this, but I could click a button and I could put up people's comments on the page.
I see this. It's very impressive.
That's pretty cool, right?
It only gets better from here.
That's right. Look at that. Okay. So that's pretty neat. I'm still trying to end this broadcast, but it just won't end. This is the broadcast that will not end.
Well, I actually have to go. I got some teaching coming up.
All right. So I'll let you off. I'll remove you from the stream. Bye, bro.
See you soon. Chag Sameach.
Shalom. Chag Sameach. Okay, guys. I don't know what to tell you. We're still stuck here going live. All right. I'll see if this works. Leave studio. I'll try to do that. God bless you guys. Shalom again.